Hey everybody, this is Randy with Carchaeology, and today's adventure we are going to dig into the 1968 Shelby GT500KR that's from the Arizona car stash. Now fortunately this one isn't as full of rat crap as the other cars we've done so far, so this one I've actually brought into the lab so we can crawl down underneath it, be on a cement floor, check out all the details and see what it really is. So we're going to be checking numbers on all of the major components in the car. We're going to inspect the car closely for rust or any previous damage and see what other treasures we find within. So please follow along. Now I know there's some incredible Mopars in this collection, and if you're a Mopar guy, this one might not suit you, but I'm going to admit openly here that this one's my favorite out of the whole bunch. I don't know exactly what it is. I don't necessarily consider myself a Mustang guy either. However, this one just has a sense and a soul to it that I think is pretty spectacular. Now, the story behind this car is that Mark purchased this in 1970 and has owned it all of these years. Now, he's passed on, and now it's time to pass the car on to somebody else. But first, we really want to check out all the history of it, document as much of it as possible, and see what it is and what it isn't. Now, some of the pieces on these Shelbys of this era were actually made out of fiberglass. The hood, the trunk lid, and much of this front end is glass, and you can see we've got a little damage here going on. Fortunately, fiberglass is fairly simple to repair. It doesn't require welding, obviously. But we've got a couple of little cracks. There's a little tiny one here I noticed as you open the hood, a tiny bit of a flex. The front bumper is obviously missing, and so we're seeing a little damage there. But overall, the front end appears really nice and straight, and I don't see any signs of any major collision damage. Now, the paint is definitely cooked on this car, and it does look to me like it has had a respray at some point. I'm seeing a couple different layers of paint, and obviously there's some spots that have been touched up with something that doesn't quite match. What's sort of interesting about it is it still really has that barn find quality, and those little touch-ups and whatever's been done in the past have all kind of blended in to give it a particularly nice, well-worn blue jean kind of a look. But getting down into the depths of it, we've got to look for rust. Now I'm seeing a little bit starting to poke through here. This is pretty minimal when it comes down to a Mustang, but I do see a blend of paint here. So it's possible that there's a little more rust that's underneath here that was covered up at one point. Now, it's been a long time since any of this paintwork is done, so you would probably see blistering if it was something that was really serious. But it's holding up pretty well. Now, looking at the Fender Wells, they actually look quite good. Got a little ding right there. Underneath the rockers is a little harder to see because of that aluminum trim piece. But if we get down a little bit lower, you can see what's underneath that. And it's all looking pretty good. In fact, the floor underneath here is looking pretty amazing as well. Now I'm going to get some light under here so we can really look deep and see if we find something, but so far, so good. Around the windshield looks quite good. The roof, while it's got some surface rust on it, I'm really not seeing any sort of bubbling or signs of any issues. Even around the window trim here, it all looks good. You're going to see more of it down towards the bottom of the window where water tends to settle, but man, everything's looking really super sound on this. Now, the trunk lid on this has definitely been cooked hard in the Arizona sun. In fact, if you get down close, you can see that original gel coat under the paint is completely gone, and it's actually even a little bit fuzzy. So that's going to require some effort to get that back to life. I think it's certainly savable. Anybody that deals with fiberglass will know how to deal with that. But it is a bit of an issue. In fact, when I first saw this, I was a little concerned that maybe this deck lid wasn't the original one for it, since the paint has cooked completely off of it. But when I opened it up and looked at the bottom side and saw that all the original finish is here, there's even the jacking information and things like that. All of that's there, and none of this looks like it's been modified or messed with as far as that. So I do believe it is the original deck lid. There's a little bit better light and we can see into the trunk. Now it does have the correct tail lights on it and the gas cap with the very faded Cobra Shelby logo. We do have a little bit of buildup of muck in here. Definitely want to clean this out and make sure that there's no rust underneath there. Doesn't appear to be, which is fantastic. Looks like the Space Saver spare is still here. It looks like there's a full set of the original Shelby hubcaps. So this car probably came with steel wheels and these caps originally. And I'm seeing some signs in here that the car was actually moved not too long ago. This is 2007. This is a temporary tag right there. And when we were playing around with the car, we noticed that the battery in it was certainly a bit newer as well. So I do think that Mark kept this thing running and moved it around a fair bit, which would explain the lack of rat crap in comparison to the other cars. Now the trunks of these cars are known for holding water, as most cars really are from the era. So we've got to get down in here and see what we have going on in some of the lower areas. Looking pretty good in here from what I can see. I'm curious to lift up the trunk mat, see what's there. So far that's looking great. Now, I want to be careful not to really disturb any of this original material in case somebody wants to keep it as a survivor. But it's looking pretty clean around the fuel tank. And that is the original stuff that's in there. But looking in the corners where there's spots where water can collect, I'm seeing a little surface rust going on here, but I'm not seeing anything that's rotted through. All of that's a really good sign. Now the original spare is here, but I'm not seeing the jack. So we'll have to look around through the house and see if maybe we can find that. Inside the passenger quarter panel is looking pretty good as well. A little bit of surface rust going on there, but I'm not seeing anything crazy. All of that's awesome. It does have this kind of funky tape-on antenna here that somebody put there, and then it looks like this power antenna was added at some point. That's certainly not a factory install there. But overall, she's looking pretty solid in the booty. And that's awesome. And we're missing a B for the Shelby emblem, but the rest of it's there. Now let's work our way down the passenger side of the car. It's a little tight here, but I'll do my best. So it looks like there might be a little tiny bit of rust that's starting to poke out here along the edge. Minimal though, really, really minimal. We're not talking anything that would require panel replacement. Just cleaning that out, maybe some real light welding just to spot those pieces, and then you're good to go. All of that's really awesome. I mean, you can spend so much money doing rust work on a car like this. Starting with something solid is going to help an awful lot. So again, Fender Wells are all looking good. The rockers are all feeling nice underneath here. Solid, solid, solid. Love it. Now these Krager mags apparently have been on the car since Mark bought it in 1970, which is actually kind of fun. They call some of these modifications like day 2 modifications. So you'd go out, you'd buy yourself your new Mustang, and then you personalize it right away with some accessories. And that's probably what happened here. Now I'm seeing a couple little tiny blisters right here. But geez, if that's the worst of it, looking good. Now right here you can see the number on the dash. And we're going to be checking numbers really closely on this car to make sure that, number one, it is a genuine Shelby, and that also it was an original 4-speed car, as well as all of the other options that are on it. Now, fortunately, with Shelby automobiles, the registry is there, and people are fanatical about tracking these cars and identifying real ones versus fake ones. So I've actually got a copy of the Shelby registry, and we're going to look it up and see if this car is in there. Now, there's also a tag on these original Shelby cars that we can look up as well. So every one of them has a serial number. So this particular one, at least to the Shelby guys, is going to be referred to as 03330. And so we can look that up in the Shelby registry, see if this car is in there, see if it shows any history. And then you can look at this number here to make sure that it matches up with the number on the dash, which we just took a look at. And of course it does. So we're dealing with a real Shelby car here. I don't think you could fake this funk and make it look that good. But let's look at the books. So along with the car from Mark came this Shelby American World Registry. Now granted, this is a fairly old one and the information in here isn't quite as complete as some of the newer versions. But looking in here, we can actually find this car amongst the books. So here's Mark's Spear. This was back when he lived in Ohio. So this must have been back in the early 80s, late 70s. And it shows the VIN number, shows all the info, and shows that 03330. But if you take a look at this particular flash here, one of our viewers had sent this in, and this shows a much more detailed history of the car. It shows the dealership that it was first sold in, as well as the options that were on it. And it also mentions a little bit of history about it, including something that I'm really curious about, that the engine was rebuilt at one point. Was it the original engine that was rebuilt? Or did they put in a rebuilt engine? So that's one of my biggest fears with this car is it a numbers matching car? So on a Ford VIN number here, let's take a look at the one here. We've got 8, which would be for 68. You've got T, which would be the assembly plant. And this is, I think it's Metuchen, New Jersey. So all Shelbys were built at the New Jersey plant. Then we've got the body style. So 02 would be the fastback. If it was 03, that would be a convertible. R is the big one that we're looking for here. That shows the 428 Cobra Jet. If it had a J, it would be 302 for the GT350. If it was an S, it'd be the regular GT500. And then the remaining numbers are just sequential Ford numbers. But let's go over to the door tag and we'll decipher that one and learn a little more. All right, we'll grab the door open here. And there's a tag on a door. Now, granted, if the door was changed, obviously that would screw this up. But it looks like this is the original door. So let's do a quick decode of the door tag here. Let me see if I can get in here and point. 63B, that is correct for the fastback with the luxury interior in black. D for color, that's Acapulco blue, which obviously we've got going on here. 5AA, that's black comfort weave material on the bucket seats. 03F, that's the production date. That's actually June 3rd of 1968. The DSO number is an important one that will help designate as to whether it was originally a Shelby car or standard production, and it was a Shelby car with special order unit 2947. Axle is an H, which is the 350-to-1 traction lock rear end, which is awesome. And very importantly, the trans. This comes up as the number 5, which is correct for the 4-speed manual. And that's huge because it's really important that the 4-speed is factory. It seems like the 4-speed cars have a bit of a higher value, gives you a little more opportunity to flex that muscle. So proving that that's the original 4-speed is awesome. And everything looks original in here. The rivets look proper. Nothing's been modified. It's all original paint and stuff in here. Definitely all pointing towards the right article. And while I'm here on the ground and I've got the door open, I'm going to take a peek underneath here to see if there's any serious rust going on the door. Doesn't look like there is. A little bit of surface rust that'll need cleaning up, but those doors aren't rotted out, and that's awesome. Now, another spot where there's a tag that we should check out is right here by the passenger side hood hinge. Now, this one's pretty crusty, so got something to wipe it up here. And let's see if the camera can break this out. Now, one thing I noticed here is that we do have a little bit of rust that's starting out right here. And I noticed just forward of this as well, there's a spot where there's a little bit of rust going on. Another common spot for Mustang stuff. And if it gets really bad, then this whole shock area here can be damaged and cause some major structural problems. Fortunately, this thing's looking pretty good. I'm not seeing anything that's really crazy around where the top of the shock mount is. But I do see these spots right here on both sides. where there's a little bit of corrosion going on or something that's happening. So the engine, to me, looks to be pretty proper. I see the correct valve covers here that say Cobra Le Mans on them. Looks like the air cleaner is correct, although it is missing the snorkel. Not a big deal. They do reproduce that. Looking down here, it looks like that alternator's been replaced. The belts are obviously junk. We need to do something there. I've got to put the fuel pump back on there. I rebuilt that original fuel pump. But I want to start looking close at the distributor, the manifold, the heads, the block, the carburetor, all of that stuff to see if it is original to the car. So let's take off that air cleaner and see what we've got here carb-wise. Now there should be a marking on this carb that will show us whether this is the correct carb for the car or not. Now what I'm seeing here is a little puzzling. Now this looks like the correct carb for a 428 Shelby. However, it looks like it's one for an automatic. Well, that's kind of bizarre. So was this carb replaced? Or was it perhaps an automatic carb that was thrown on there at the factory and it's a variance from original? I don't know. I mean, it's obviously a factory 4-speed car. So why it's got an automatic carb on it, I don't know. Let's keep looking. Now, one of the common upgrades on these 428 motors is to go to the Police Interceptor manifold, which is aluminum and saves like 25 pounds. And a lot of times people will paint those blue so it looks original and is a stock one. So definitely check it. We've got a good hard stick here. That is definitely the original cast iron manifold. Okay, I've put a little light back here, so hopefully I can get a clear enough shot as to what's going on here. And let me see if I wipe it with something, if I can get it to liven up a little bit. Okay, yeah, that's cleaner here. So, C80E, that's good, 9425. I think that's correct. It is. Let's see, is that an A or a C on the end? It looks like a C. So yeah, we've got a correct Cobra Jet manifold here, which is fantastic. That's cool. So we know it's not just a standard 428 manifold. It's definitely the Cobra Jet. Now there's casting numbers on the cylinder heads as well, and they are right between the two center spark plugs. Wish I could show that to you, but from what I can see, it does look like it is the correct head. Okay, so the manifold, heads, and carburetor look correct for a 428 Cobra Jet. That's awesome, but we need to find out if the engine block is the original one to the car. Now, it's really, really hard to tell on these whether they are the original block to this car. In fact, it's almost impossible unless you can access a stamping that's on the back of the motor that actually has a partial VIN number on it. But that's not something I can easily show you. But what I can show you is that there is a casting date number on the block that's down underneath by the oil filter. So let me see if I can get up underneath here and show you that casting date. So if we look at this, we can see what the production date is on that engine. Let's see, that's 1966. L would be November and 28th. So this is a November 28, 1966 block. And that's just not right for a 1968 car. So guess what? Wrong block on this bad boy. And that's a big hit in value, unfortunately. I just noticed something while I was under here checking the block number. Check out that spring. Well, that's not right. It's got a broken front spring, and it also looks like it has some fantastic Fender Wells lighting from its days in the 70s. Let's see if I can get in here with the phone. And what I'm looking for is a metal tag, which I think that's it, that'll show us a code on the transmission. To see whether it's the original one or not. So I've gotten in here and I've scraped as close as I can. And let me see if I can capture this with the camera. The code should be RUGAF, which it appears to be. So that's totally awesome. This is the original 4-speed transmission of this car. All right, let's get underneath the back of the car and we'll see if it's got the tag on the rear end. And it appears it does. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. Get a little more light on this for you. And that is looking like the original rear end to me. Hallelujah on that. So while I'm underneath here looking at the rear end and the trans, I'm getting a pretty good view of the underside of this car, and it's looking really solid. And that area up there is a notorious spot for Mustangs to rust. They don't call them Rustangs for nothing. But there's a spot back behind the rear end that's also a notorious problem for rust on these cars, and I want to check that out as well. Here, near the spring perch at the back, there's some areas that are known to be kind of troublesome here. Let's see if I can block the light well enough that you can see what's going on here. And I am seeing a little bit of rust up in here, right at the back of the frame rail. And that's a pretty common spot. Fortunately, not too difficult to work on. I'm also seeing a bit of a exhaust leak here, but that exhaust has somehow been modified here. I don't think this is right. Having these stick out right here, they should be coming out those holes. A little goofy, but kind of cool. So let's check this other side here. Back by the spring perch, there's a tow hook back here. And it's looking a little crusty around this area here. You can see up at the top. So it's right at the back of the frame, just above the spring perch at the back corner. And that's a common spot, a little bit of rust. And if that's the worst of it on this car, which it certainly appears to be, that's nothing. Let's check out the interior of the car and see what we've got and what is not. Looks like the right door sill is here, Shelby Automotive Inc. Door panel has the little right grill piece on the bottom. I am noticing that that's missing over on the passenger side. Looks like the door sill is off of there as well. Oh, there they are. So here's that door sill and door bottom on that side. Now that rear seat looks amazing. They call this the sport deck. That folds down. I folded it up earlier and was blown away with just how nice that rear seat is. The carpet obviously back behind it and on top of it is faded, but it is original. It looks like the original seat material is all here. This is that texture weave stuff. Even looks like it might be original carpets in the car. A little bit of shrapnel there. Now the odometer shows just over 40,000 miles. I'm going to assume that's 140,000, just looking at the overall condition of the car. Looks like the correct emblem is here in the center of the steering wheel. That dash pad, I don't think Armor All is going to fix that. Now it's missing the radio and the glove box, which is kind of a bummer. I do see the original Shelby emblem there. And I've looked underneath. There's supposed to be a build sheet that's sometimes wrapped around the wiring here or back behind the dash. And we've looked all over the place and haven't had any luck with finding that. It might also be underneath the carpet, but I don't want to dig the carpet out of this because it does appear to be the original carpet, and the last thing I want to do is screw it up. I do see the right fog light switch here. It does have a Hurst shifter in it, which I don't believe is correct. The gauges and stuff are here. Obviously it's a little messy, but it should clean up to a certain extent. Now the headliner in the car is pretty toast. Those door panels, maybe you could save them if you wanted to keep the car original. The headliner back here, the headliner is just falling down. It does have the roll bar with the proper seat belts that come right down in the center. And I did notice on the center console, it does have the embossed Cobra. So that's pretty cool as well. So the interior of this car looks very complete with the exception of that radio and glove box liner. And very original. I don't think anything's been done in here other than maybe the swap of that shifter and some rubber floor mats. Okay, it's hot. I'm dirty, and I've spent a good bit of time underneath this pig trying to figure out what it's really all about. And I've got to say, it's a lot more good than it is bad. Now, yeah, that's a big hit that it doesn't have the original engine block in it. That's definitely going to hurt its value to collectors. But from front to back, the rest of the car is really untouched. You've got to chase down a bumper, you've got to chase down a radio for it, a glove box liner, maybe the stock steel wheels so you can put those hubcaps back on it. But the rest of it, pretty much spot on original. It's had some use, it's had some maybe mild abuse, but it's a super solid, complete original car that somebody is absolutely going to fall in love with. Do you restore it? Do you keep it the way it is? Well, that's up to the new owner to decide. But I think we've done our job to figure out exactly what's going on here and properly represent it for the family so that folks know exactly what they're getting. Now, I'm really curious to see where this car is going to end up and what's going to happen to it. It's, as I've said before, it's my favorite car out of the batch. There's something about it that's really pulling at me, and I wish that it was in my wheelhouse to keep it, but it's not. But I've certainly had some fun with it. I'm going to get the fuel pump back in it here shortly. I'm going to try to move it under its own power just for giggles, and I'll show some video of that if we can get it to do that. But that's the inspection of our 68 GT500KR. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned something. I've certainly learned something through the process. And I hope you subscribe to watch our future videos on different cars that we're digging up. We're digging up history on wheels here, folks. Carchaeology, that's what it's all about. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.